The next morning, May woke to find that she was no longer in her own bed. She was lying in Sarah's bed. She couldn't remember how she got there, and she didn't dare tell Sarah.
From forgotten folklore to hidden histories, some records demand to be found.
When Sarah and May were studying at a university in the north of England, they shared a room on the top floor of the halls. The room was small. 2 single beds stood against the walls, with a desk for each of them by the window, and in the corner stood a tall wooden wardrobe. There was still a gap between the top of the wardrobe and the ceiling. One night, after May turned off the lights, she saw a dark shape on top of the wardrobe. She thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. She said nothing, and she didn't tell Sarah. For the next few nights, every time the lights went out, the dark shape was there. Sometimes it seemed a little thicker. Sometimes it seemed to lean towards the beds. But whenever she steadied herself and looked again, it was just a shadow in the corner of the room. A few days later, Sarah went out one evening and did not return to the room that night. May was alone in the room. She was so tired that she fell asleep without knowing when. In the middle of the night, she woke suddenly. She couldn't move. When she opened her eyes, the ceiling was so close it almost touched her face. She couldn't feel the mattress beneath her back. It was as if she were suspended in midair. She tried to look down at her own bed, but her neck wouldn't obey her. She could only close her eyes and pretend nothing was happening. Every second stretched out, her heart pounded, and all she could hear was her own ragged breathing. She didn't know how long it lasted before she finally fell asleep again. The next morning, May woke to find that she was no longer in her own bed. She was lying in Sarah's bed. She couldn't remember how she got there, and she didn't dare tell Sarah. From that night on, May felt that as long as she didn't sleep, the thing couldn't reach her. So, she kept the computer on every night, surfing the internet until 6 in the morning before she went to sleep. Sarah thought it was strange, but May said nothing. This went on for a while, and May was exhausted every day. One night, May went to bed early, planning to take a short nap while Sarah was still studying. She planned to get up after Sarah fell asleep and carry on online, but she was so tired that once she fell asleep, she slept until the early hours. When she woke, Sarah was already asleep and the room lights were off. The room was lit only by the faint glow seeping in from outside the window. Suddenly, she couldn't move again. She looked at the top of the wardrobe and saw the dark shape. She looked more closely and realized it wasn't a shadow at all. It was a child, sitting on top of the wardrobe. The child sat with its legs tucked up, both hands hanging down in front of its knees, head lowered, looking down at the 2 beds in the room. May used every bit of strength she had to call Sarah's name. Sarah! She didn't know if any sound had actually come out. Every time she tried to call again, the weight on her chest pressed down harder. Sarah. The sky outside stayed dark. May could only stare at Sarah's bed across the room and call her name again and again. As the sky began to turn gray, the pressure on her slowly eased. The next morning, May asked Sarah straight away, "Did you hear me calling you last night?" Sarah said, "Yes." May looked at her. "Then why didn't you answer me?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because the moment I heard you calling me, there was another voice right by my ear, telling me not to get involved." May said nothing. Sarah went on. "The voice was very close, right by my pillow. It was small, like a child's. I couldn't see anyone, but it kept telling me not to help you." After that, neither of them climbed up to look on top of the wardrobe. That morning, they went straight to the hall's office and applied to change rooms. Until the move was approved, they didn't dare turn all the lights off at night. One year, my school sent us to a short military training camp in mainland China. The dorms were part of an old medical building. The seniors warned us not to wander upstairs. Our class had 44 people. Normally 8 people shared one dorm, and the dorm was square, with a bunk bed in every corner. But with 44 of us, 4 were left over, and we slept in the 8-person room. When Alex, Chris, Joe, and I got there, the sheets were filthy. One had a pale yellow human-shaped sweat stain, but we were too exhausted to care. We fell asleep soon after dinner. Then the air conditioner began clacking and woke all of us up, leaving us hot and sweating. We started talking and telling scary stories. Then Joe said, "Let's play the Four Corners game." I asked him what that was. He explained the rules. 4 people face 4 corners, numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, and move clockwise. Number 1 walks to number 2, taps his shoulder, and takes his corner. The player tapped moves on to number 3. Number 3 taps 4. The 4th goes back to the empty first corner and knocks or coughs. You only look at the walls or corners. People say the game has 3 possible outcomes. First, nothing happens. You hear one signal from the empty corner every cycle. Second, the coughing or knocking stops. If an empty corner gives no cough or knock, something has filled it and come to play with you. Third, you hear more and more sounds. That means the people who were playing with you are no longer there. Where they went, nobody knows. That was the kind of game we were playing, so we dragged all 4 bunk beds into the middle and pushed them together, and the 4 of us played. After many rounds, the dorm lights suddenly snapped off. We kept playing, but my heart started racing. In the dark, the gaps between the coughs and knocks grew longer and longer. The room was still hot, but sweat ran cold down my back. The longer the silences, the more afraid I became. I didn't know if my ears were playing tricks or what. I was very scared. I kept walking, but my heart was pounding so hard that I could hear my heartbeat. I wanted to leave, so I took out my phone. I started texting Alex. "I don't want to continue. Let's go to the beds." He texted back, "Okay." I didn't know Joe or Chris's phone numbers, so I typed, "Turn on the SOS light." I left the message on my phone and put it on the floor. As soon as I stood up, a hand tapped my shoulder. The hand was so cold that it sent chills down my spine. I could only hope it was one of my friends. Footsteps still circled the room. For a long time, there was no cough or knock. As I continued walking, flashes from my phone moved across the figure ahead of me. I immediately grabbed him and pulled him over. It was Joe, holding my phone beside his flashing SOS light. We went back to the beds together. Alex was already waiting there. Footsteps kept circling the room, but there was still no cough or knock. I asked how we could warn Chris, who was still playing. Joe said, "Let's get the hell out of here first." My legs were shaking. At last, one long cough came from somewhere in the room. Then suddenly Joe's hand went freezing cold. He snapped, like he'd lost his mind. He ran at the dorm door and rattled it like crazy. The door would not open. Alex and I rushed over to help him, but together we still could not pull it open. The door was an old-fashioned kind, with a very big keyhole. Joe crouched down and looked through the keyhole to see if someone was blocking the door from outside. But the moment he looked, something was terribly wrong, like he'd seen something and gotten a shock. Joe scrambled backwards on the floor, pushing with his feet, all the way from the door. Alex and I pulled harder. Joe suddenly got up, slammed into my back, and the door swung open. The 3 of us charged out. The corridor lights were out, but moonlight let us see. Catching our breath, I asked, "What do we do?" "Chris is still inside." The door stayed open. After 2 or 3 minutes, we still hadn't gone back in. None of us dared cross the open doorway. Then Chris finally walked out by himself and asked us as if nothing had happened, "What are you all doing? Why are you standing here?" We were surprised he got out and asked if he was okay. He said he was fine, seemingly confused, why we were looking so worried. We asked Chris how he got out. He said, "After someone tapped my shoulder, I followed along the wall. After a while, I saw the door open, so I walked out." We explained to him that we'd been out of the room for 2 or 3 minutes. There was nobody left playing with him. Chris turned pale and froze. Finally, he asked, "Then who just touched me?" We really didn't know. We decided to find the instructor. Upon hearing our story, he arranged for us to sleep on the floor of a room filled with other classmates. We slept until morning. We had to leave that day, so once it was broad daylight, we went back for our luggage. Before we left, I took one last look around the room. Apart from what happened last night, it was an ordinary dorm room. I looked at the bed again. The yellow human-shaped stain on the sheet was dark yellow now, very dirty. Then I looked at the pillow and felt something was off. The pillow had a pale yellow stain shaped like an entire face. But I ignored it. I figured last night's experience had made me overthink it. On the bus home, we asked Joe why he panicked after looking through the keyhole. He stammered. I looked through the keyhole and saw an eye looking back at me. We all froze. When I was studying in Australia, I lived in a share house that was basically student accommodation. The house was in an interesting location. It was very close to a cemetery. There were 3 rooms, and I lived there with 2 friends, Patrick and Catherine. At first, being near a cemetery didn't bother us. I assumed cemeteries overseas wouldn't feel as frightening as the ones back home in Asia. We moved in halfway through the semester. Usually a house doesn't suddenly become available then. But this one did, so we took it. After a day or 2, the previous tenants came back for their mail. They were from Europe, so we handed it over and started chatting. I asked why they'd moved out. They hesitated, then said, there were some problems with this house. They must have left quickly. It was strange, but we didn't think much of it. About a week later, one afternoon, I was still unpacking in my room. Suddenly, I saw a man walk past my doorway and continue into the house. My room was the first along the hallway. 2 more rooms were further inside. At the time, only Patrick and I were home, and Patrick was supposed to be asleep. I assumed Patrick had woken up. I followed immediately to see what he was doing, but Patrick was indeed still sleeping. I wondered if Catherine had come back from school, but I was certain the person I'd seen was a man. I'd followed right away, yet he'd already disappeared. I thought maybe he'd moved quickly into one of the rooms. Then I thought about it again. He'd made no sound. I remembered the jeans and t-shirt and how fast he was walking. I went back to unpacking and told myself I must have imagined it. Later, I told Patrick and Catherine what I'd seen. They both looked frightened. Patrick told me he'd sometimes heard someone running down the hallway at night. When he opened his door, the house was empty. Catherine said she had once woken to her bedroom door slowly moving. Nobody laughed. Patrick kept looking toward the hallway, and Catherine locked her door that night. After that, none of us wanted to stay, so we decided to move. We lived there for less than a month. The previous tenants had said the house was strange. They wouldn't tell us what had happened. I never looked into it. We only knew he wasn't one of us. History only leaves us the fragments. The rest lives in the shadows. Thank you for exploring these dark corners with me tonight. If you enjoy where folklore meets history, hit that like button and subscribe to join the circle for our next tale.